Hello, and welcome to Tampa Bay Community Network's Spotlight on Humanism. My name is Jennifer Hancock. I'm the Executive Director of the Humanists of Florida Association. We are an association, statewide association of groups and individuals that affirm the humanist worldview. We work to promote the use of reason and compassion in the solving of human problems, and we work to create a more humane world. I have with me into the studio today Matt Cherry, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Humanist Studies, as well as a member of the UN Committee on Freedom of Religion or Belief.
Right.
And also Mynga Furtrell from California. She is a humanist educator that works with objectivity, accuracy, and balance in teaching about religion. And today we're going to talk about humanism. What humanism is, why it's important, why we are members of the humanist community, and some of the issues that we work on a day-to-day basis. So, what is humanism? That's the big question. How would you, Matt, describe humanism?
Well, simply, humanism is the belief that this is the only life we have, and we have to make the best of it for ourselves and for each other.
Excellent. And Mynga?
I guess I would say it's a life stance that is compatible with science, actually grounded in democratic values, and has a hopeful vision for humanity.
Excellent. I'm very fond myself of Kurt Vonnegut's definition, which is being a humanist means doing the right thing without any expectation of reward or punishment after you die. And my husband actually has a very interesting definition that he insists that I use whenever I speak, which is that humanism is a moral alternative way of living and thinking. It's a philosophy with a very long tradition. It goes back to the Greeks and Romans. And as you mentioned, our democracy is really founded on the principles of individual freedom and compassion for individuals and the respect and dignity for all people. So humanism does have a very, very long tradition. But how did you become a humanist? When did you realize that you were a humanist and wanted to proudly wear the humanist name? Mynga?
Well, I think I became a humanist before I knew that there was such a thing as a humanist. In other words, I had many of the values that now I have given a name to, and the name is humanism. But basically, I have a deity-free worldview that developed over time. I had a lot of questioning. I was a very inquiring person. I was reared in had a Protestant upbringing, but I was a very questioning person, always reading, and I had difficulty in kind of bringing together my own understanding of empirical reality with much of the religious narrative that I was learning as I went along. So as a questioner, I began to read more, I began to investigate more, and I began to think of my life as one life, as Matt said, to live, and I was face to face with my human mortality. I developed that as a part of my worldview and wanted to make the best of the one life that I had without, as you said, the reward or punishment after I die. I don't think there's that possibility. Therefore, I have to do the best to be make the best of the life that I have and contribute the most to humanity while I'm walking this one earth that we have.
Excellent. Well, when did you learn about humanism, the term humanism?
Well, actually, quite recently, if one thinks about my lifespan, which I'm approaching 60 now. It was in the late 80s. The Humanist Association had a conference in Sacramento, California. I read about it in the newspaper, and the speaker was Isaac Asimov. I was very interested in attending to hear this man speak, and that's when I came face to face with humanism and learned that there was a humanist organization in our area, and that's what brought me into one would call probably the humanist movement.
Excellent. And Matt, how did you become a humanist?
Well, I was always a humanist. I just didn't realize that was a name for it, let alone that there was organizations and a whole movement of humanists. But I grew up in England, so I had a slightly unusual upbringing by American standards because my parents were non-religious, but I went to a religious school because that was a local public school. There's no separation of church and state in England. So I actually went to a Church of England school and learned all about Christianity and had to have prayers every morning and so forth. But I wasn't religious myself, and my family weren't religious. But it wasn't until after I graduated from college that I actually discovered there was a name for my viewpoint, and that there were organizations that were dedicated to defending humanist ideas and promoting humanist values.
Excellent. Well, for me, I grew up in a non-religious household. Half of my family is Orthodox Jewish, very Orthodox Jewish, and the other half is devoutly Catholic, very devoutly Catholic. And my parents made the radical decision in the 60s to not raise us with any religion, that they would give us, the children, the opportunity to decide for ourselves what we wanted to be or think. And my mother and I had a great time when I was younger. We went to every church and synagogue and temple in Los Angeles and explored together all the different faiths. And then later on, when I was 17, I thought, well, I don't think there's any supernatural influence in the universe. And then later on, you know, I was into the Enlightenment philosophers. I was reading Voltaire. I was reading, you know, all of these people that really were seminal in forming our country's philosophy and democracy. And then, like you, I found out about a conference. About 8 years ago, they brought Piers Anthony into a conference in Tampa. And I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I wanted to see Piers Anthony. I went into the room and realized I was in a room of people that think just like me. And it was very, very exciting for me, and that's how I got involved in the movement.
It's interesting. Your experience of having, with your mother, having explored different alternatives is very similar to mine, because I started out with Sunday school in the Southern Baptist Church. I took catechism in the Presbyterian. I moved to the Methodist, where that's when I really began to question. At the same time in our country, this is back in the 50s, we were learning that the Pledge of Allegiance that I had learned as a youngster had to be changed during the McCarthy era, when Under God was placed into the pledge. I had to go through a kind of shift of gears at that point. Why? You know, I didn't understand that. I was always an explorer. I even explored up into my teen years. I took instruction in the Catholic Church. So I have broadened, and in my family they call me the apple that rolled away from the tree, because I really, all of this exploration, this reading, I think probably Bertrand Russell, it took about 2 paragraphs from Bertrand Russell in the preface to his book, Why I'm Not a Christian, to kind of have everything just come together for me. And I finally realized that, like you said, that this is a deity-free environment. I can't rely on the supernatural, and so off we go from there to figure out our own human purpose and meaning of life. And I think I've done it, and I'm very pleased with it.
Absolutely. We want to encourage you, if you want to find more about humanism, to visit our website at www.floridahumanist.org or call us at 941-745-7181 to get more information about our organization and about humanism in general. The next question I want to ask and talk about is, why is humanism important? Obviously, both of you are very active in the humanist movement on a national level, and for you, Matt, at an international level. Why be active in humanism? Why not just sit back and say, this is my philosophy, that's fine? Why promote the philosophy? Matt?
Well, I believe humanism is very important because it shapes all of your other values. It's where you get your values from, just as a person of faith gets their values from their faith. And therefore, it's important to defend and articulate and advance those values. But it also inspires you to want to put those values into action and to be working for a better world and to get involved in social causes. And although all these different belief groups, you know, share certain values, and we all have the sort of common moral values of, you know, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, at least in theory. I mean, not everyone practices that. There are also areas where there's big differences in viewpoints on things like the right to voluntary euthanasia or on reproductive freedom, where different people have very conflicting views. They're very sincerely held, and each side believes they're doing what's best for the people or what's ordained, you know, by morality, but they disagree very strongly. And I feel the humanists have a very clear viewpoint and a very important role to play in trying to promote their values and defend people's right to make their own choices and their own decisions about these issues.
So it's a matter of protecting the individual's right to themselves, to their autonomy, to their thoughts,
Right.
to their body, etc.
Their right to make their own decisions about life and death that affect themselves,
Okay.
and have control and to determine their own future and to give their own shape and meaning to their own life.
So to a certain extent, your desire to promote humanism does fall into public policy promotion.
Yes, in many areas, because there are many areas where the right to make your own decisions about your life are constrained or restricted.
Okay.
And there's also a whole area of working to make society and the world a better place. I mean, there's a lot of places in the world, a lot of people, whether disadvantaged people in rich societies or in poorer parts of the world, where they just don't have the freedom, the economic freedom to decide their own lives. And they often live lives of misery because they don't have the sort of freedoms and the luxuries that we come to expect in the richer world.
Absolutely, and I always think too that one of the benefits to the humanist way of life is because we're not fooled by religious charlatans specifically, people that are preying on poor, uneducated people and playing on their religious fears or hopes and dreams,
Right.
and extracting money from them that only makes their poverty situation worse.
Yeah.
So in places like India, I think they talk about atheism. Someone told me they talked about atheism as it's not just about a non-belief in God, it's also being free from having to pay money
Right.
to all these religious charlatans. So
Free from superstitions,
Free from
which often hold people back and prevent them from realizing their potential.
excellent. Mynga, how about you?
Well, I think what interests me most is where do we get our worldviews to start with? We're not born with them. It's an enculturation process. And I think what makes me more interested in a humanist activism to a certain degree is that I'm more hopeful for what children can have built into them as they go along. It's very difficult to subtract from the kind of perspectives that are built in when you're very young. If superstitions are built in, if things that don't have any compatibility with empirical reality become a part of your head, they're very difficult to unload. I think it's important what we build in. I think it's important we build in respect for humanity, to realize that we're all part, we have a lot in common. No matter whether we're in one of these poor countries, whether we're brought up in this country, there's a lot of human commonality. And I fear that a lot of the religious narratives tend to divide us. They give us things in our heads that may not be really tied to reality, but boy, they're real to us. And therefore, we have these, we carry around this perspective, and yet it divides us from people who have different perspectives. So I'm very interested in building in a hopeful, positive perspective that we all can share. And I think it would add a lot if we were able to nurture this cultural vision of respect for human dignity, autonomy, for understanding that we all have needs. I think it would be very helpful to peace and world. We only have this one Earth, and so we have to work together. We have to learn that it's not us against them. We have to override this us against them kind of perspectives, and so I'm very interested in what's built in the first place, and I think humanism has a lot to offer to get us going, to make the best of this life that we have on Earth.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I like about humanism and one of the reasons why I'm interested in promoting it. I know for me on a personal level that dealing with the world as it is, as opposed to how I hope it would be, it really helps me succeed in life better than I think I could if I was burdened with some beliefs that didn't match up with what actually happens around me. And I know I'm a happy person partially because I'm interacting with the world in all its grandeur as it is, as opposed to hoping for something else later on after I die.
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding that many humanists or people who are God-free have that it's a hopeless situation. Oh my gosh, how can you stand it? Actually, it's a very liberating thing.
Yeah.
The awe, we have the same feelings as everybody else. We get really inspired by looking at the stars or inspecting a flower. I call that awe real, because it's the same feelings that many people call spiritual feelings or religious feelings, but it's real, it's based on a real compatibility with the empirical reality, and that's where humanism is very much in sync with science. I think we do get our understanding of the world to the degree that science has been able to give us explanations from that direction, and therefore we don't have to match up with some of the narratives that tell us about miracles and supernatural things that just don't quite mesh, but basically we kind of buy into them because the culture has bought into them.
Right.
The culture says that's the way you should think, that's what you should believe. So in that sense, we're kind of a smaller, non-conforming to the mainstream of this country and most countries, actually.
Not all countries, though.
No, not all. Not
So
all.
I grew up in Britain, which there's almost a mirror image of America. It has, formally it's religious, there's an established Church of England, but the actual society and people are very non-religious. And I think in my generation, the vast majority do not believe in God, certainly don't have any devout faith. And I'm not just making this up, all the surveys show that people under the age of 40 in Britain and in nearly every Western European country, 60–70% do not believe in God. And in the society as a whole, the figures are around about 50% in most Western countries, whether it's France, Britain, Germany, Scandinavia. So in those countries there's an experience of, everyone's a humanist. And even the people who say they're religious, Monday to Saturday, they act as humanists in everyday life. Their moral attitudes, their values on things like sexual freedom and individual rights are very much based in the humanist tradition, even if on Sunday they may go to church. But in Britain and elsewhere, that's a really diminishing minority who now practice in religion.
Interesting. Interesting. I noticed when I was in England and when I meet people from England, and I mentioned that I work for the Humanists of Florida, they know what humanism is. They know the term. And
Right.
in the U.S., no one seems to know the term except for the religious extremists who hate us.
Yeah, no,
Which I suppose if you're upsetting the religious extremists, you're doing something right.
But they often have a caricature of, secular humanists are devil worshippers or people who believe anything goes and have no moral values, and it's really very far from the truth. I mean, to be called a devil worshipper when you don't believe in any supernatural is just bizarre.
Strange, yes.
And to say you have no moral values when you spend your whole life working to promote moral values. Sure, our moral values differ from religious extremists, but it doesn't mean we don't have any moral values. They're just different moral values based on different origins.
Right, but as you mentioned, our moral values are very common human
Right.
moral values. We are compassionate. This is one of the values
Yes.
that all humanists share. We're compassionate people. We are responsible, not just to ourselves, but to the world in which we live. We're ethical people. There's ethical humanists. So these are values that the majority of, I think, humans share, and certainly the majority of Americans share.
Yes.
There's a small fringe element that's, very strange out there, but most people share these values.
Right.
If you want to learn more, visit our website at www.floridahumanist.org or call us at 941-745-7181. Now, you both are activists and you're both working on very, very interesting things. Mynga, can you tell us a little bit about your work with objectivity, accuracy, and balance in teaching about religion?
Well, with that long name, it grew out of the fact that some states, and in fact most states now, have moved to implementing religion in the curriculum. And the public school curriculum, which is our main interest. And the interesting thing is that left out of this concept of teaching about religion in our history and so forth is the concept of non-religion, as the courts would call it, or free thought, as humanism and atheism and so forth, as we might call it. It's left out. Youngsters are being taught about, actually, how religion has had an influence in history. They are being given the religious connections of various people who have played a role in history. But basically, many of the people that played a role in American history, for example, were people who were coming from a non-religious perspective or from a very critical of revealed religion perspective. And that kind of information is not in the curriculum. If we have people such as Thomas Jefferson or Thomas Paine, who played a very large role. Many of our founders were deists. Most Americans, they don't really understand what deism is. They think it's kind of a watered-down brand of Christianity. And students are not given a chance to learn how Enlightenment values came to light and were put into practice in this country through our founding political institutions. They really reflect a lot of free thought in history, yet free thought in history is not being labeled as such. These people who played such a role as free thinkers are not showing up. They're not labeled as such. And so religion gets a real slant toward, hey, it was great in American history and in world history, but basically there's been a very long history way back before Christ of atheistic perspectives, of independent thinking, of nonconformity to the standard religious beliefs. There's a very long history, and it is accompanied by great progress in humankind. And I think we need to make sure that that view gets in there. That's why we want objectivity, accuracy, balance in teaching about religion, which is really teaching about something broader than religion. It's teaching about human worldviews that people act upon and make changes in the world. So we're developing curriculum materials that can supplement what is now in standard textbooks, which unfortunately tend to mix religious narratives with an academic perspective. And for a teacher, for example, who's brought up in a mainstream religion in this country, they're not really keen on separating academic perspectives of history from what they learned in Sunday school. It seems like Moses did certain kinds of things. That's real because that's built into them and that's what they learn. It's very difficult to separate, well, what an academic perspective of Moses might have been. Very different kind of thing. And what we want taught is conventional history, accurate science, and so forth. That's what we're working on.
What do you say to the critics who say, well, why not teach about religion in the school? Why not have the textbooks talk about, how Christianity affected the world, how Islam affected the world? Why not?
Why not? In other words, I actually would say that we do need to teach about religion in the public schools. We need people to understand all of the varied perspectives, because we live in, and I hope we will continue to live in, a pluralistic society. We have a common vision. We have to all learn to get along with one another. So you do this better when you're more broadly informed. You need to be accurately informed about Christianity and its roles throughout history, warts and blemishes, in addition to the positive impacts, which there have been positive impacts. And that's true for any religion. The sacred texts and narratives of many religions are well worth reading and studying. But at the same time, what we want to do is make sure that we understand that our main role is in a country where we respect civic and democratic values. We have to learn to get along with each other. Therefore, we need accurate information. We don't need it to be one-sided.
It's interesting how that coincides with the work I'm doing at the United Nations, because we are working to try and defend the right to freedom of religion or belief, which means the right to all religions or to be non-religious. But as well as trying to defend the actual legal rights that exist around the world, we're trying to promote greater understanding and respect for the diversity of faiths. So we're trying to promote the same kind of things that you're doing, which is to say, don't just tell people they have the right to believe what they want. Tell them what everyone else believes and what they practice and why they follow those religions, so they have a better understanding of the people who are their neighbors or who live in other countries, and also to show the history and the beliefs of the millions and around the world, the billions of people who are non-religious or who do not believe in a God. So I think it's great that you're working in that area.
There's a kind of a saying in education, and actually there's some action around these 3 R's. Normally people think reading, writing, and arithmetic, and 3 R's in a project that I'm on the advisory council for is rights, responsibility, and respect, or rights, respectability, and respect and responsibility, whichever way you want to say it. But those 3 R's, the individuals do have rights, and of course we're very keen on that in this country, if we could put into practice our goals, and respect for others' rights to have we haven't walked in their shoes, they have a right to their beliefs, but the responsibility thing is what gets dropped off very often. We are responsible to protect those rights for everybody else. I think that's one of the wonderful things about our founding documents, the First Amendment, freedom of and for religion.
Excellent, excellent. Matt, what other issues are you working on? I know the Institute for Humanist Studies works with people all over the world. Can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, the Institute is set up to increase public understanding and awareness of humanism. And we work to do that through providing information to the general public, to the media, to politicians and academics. And we do a lot of our work is on the internet. We're a fairly new organization, and our main medium for communication is the internet because we feel that's the up-and-coming, the rising medium of the 21st century. And it's also a great medium to get information out to a very wide audience, to find people who are looking for information about all sorts of issues relating to humanism or non-religious beliefs. So we're doing a lot of work to provide educational courses online. We also try to help other humanist groups in their work, for example, by providing them with websites for their own organizations. We also provide grants and support and advice for other organizations to help them with their work and their missions.
Excellent.
I think, since you mentioned the website, I want to make sure that I mention one of our web resources, which is supported by OBITAR. It's for teachers. We focus on public school teachers, and we're interested in the concept of religious neutrality, helping teachers who work with youngsters to become more neutral, to understand, to know the guidelines, how to behave as neutrally as possible so that you don't favor any one worldview over another. And we provide information for teachers also on the I guess you might say, the Cliff's Notes or the Chicken McNuggets of the varied worldviews. We do 9. We do Buddhism, Christianity, the spectrum of worldviews, including the non-religious worldview, so that teachers can be more informed.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming down here today.